Hey everybody, welcome back to week 3 of the Sandhill Sling Sew Along. I'm super excited today. We're going to be assembling the exterior. We're going to assemble the lining, and after that we just have 1 week left of putting it all together. So we're getting close to the end and this week's going to be fun. So let's get started. Okay, so to start we're going to work on the exterior gusset, and I'm just got the pieces grabbed. So I've just got the bottom gusset, the 2 top gusset pieces, and then the double pull zipper. And those are the 3 we'll be working on for right now. So first you can set the bottom gusset aside. We're going to grab one of the top gusset pieces, and you're going to lay your zipper right side down on the top edge. It doesn't matter which edge you pick, but just the one long edge. And I put my pulls all the way to one side. Obviously when we're done sewing it, they can be moved to either side, but I move them out of the way so that when I'm sewing along the zipper, I don't have to move my zipper foot past them. Okay, so I've clipped these in place. We're going to go ahead and sew this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So again, we'll sew along this long edge with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've got my narrow foot on. You could also use a zipper foot here. Okay, so now that we have that sewn, we're going to go ahead and we're going to press that fabric away from the zipper. Okay, so the top gusset is pressed away from the zipper, and we'll go ahead and repeat the same for the remaining top gusset piece, putting on the opposite side of the zipper here. Okay, and we'll take it over to the machine, and we're going to sew again at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all along that long edge. Okay, so the top gusset pieces are sewn onto each side of the zipper, and if needed, you may need to trim the overall width here to 4 inches, and that's close enough for me. It's just a hair over, but if yours are off, just trim it so that you have an equal amount on each side, and just use your gridded ruler. And I would center the zipper on the 2-inch marking and then go off of that. But then we'll bring the zipper pulls to the center, and then I'm going to baste on each end here across the zipper teeth, and then I'm going to go ahead and trim off the zipper. There's no need right now to top stitch along either side of this fabric. So if you're tempted to do that, just wait, we'll be doing it further down the line. Okay, so I've basted along each end of the zipper, and then we'll go ahead and trim away that excess zipper tape. Okay, so then next we have the bottom gusset. So we're going to attach that. And the first step is to place our top gusset that's all assembled. We're going to place it right side down, aligning it to one short end of this bottom gusset piece. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance right across. Okay, so now that end is sewn, and we're going to just align this other short end, right sides together with the other end of the bottom gusset piece. And again, we'll sew across here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that we've got the gusset all assembled in a loop, we're going to go ahead and we're going to press these seam allowances. The seam allowance will go down toward the bottom gusset. Okay, so then next, after we've got it pressed, we're going to go ahead and top stitch right along that folded edge on the bottom gusset piece. Okay, so that's it for the exterior gusset. It's all assembled and ready to go, and we'll attach that to the exterior pieces in just a second. But right now we're going to work on the lining gusset, which is a lot of the same steps minus the zipper. Grab your 2 top gusset pieces, and we are going to turn these long edges to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. So we'll go ahead and we'll press those each in by 1/2 inch. If your fabric does not have a distinct right and wrong side, if you're using a solid, for example, I would go ahead and I would mark maybe with your water-soluble pen or tailor's chalk and just with an X or something to indicate that that's the wrong side of your fabric so you don't get turned around when you're sewing it. Same for your other pieces, if that's helpful. Okay, so I like to use a seam gauge when I'm over at the ironing board. It's just easy to keep this kind of smallish tool over here. And then I'll just use my starch and spray it first before I press. If you've been sewing for a while, you'll probably be able to eyeball that half-inch seam allowance, but it's always good to double check. Okay, so we've got the same steps going on as we did for the exterior pieces, but this is the way we do it for the lining. Since there's no zipper holding these two top gusset pieces together, we're going to align this short end to one short end of the bottom gusset. And see how I have the folded edge toward the inside. When we go to assemble the whole bag with the lining, this will be the interior where you will attach it next to the zipper. And then we'll go ahead and place the other top gusset piece right side down on top, this time aligning it to this other short end. Again, these folded edges are meeting in the middle. There's about a half-inch gap in between here. I'll clip these in place and then we'll take it over to the machine and sew right across this short end. Okay, so just to reiterate here, the fabrics are going to be right sides together. So the bottom gusset fabric is right side together with the top gusset fabric. And then we'll sew across this short end. And you can stop here and backstitch and cut the thread and start. It doesn't really matter. If you continue sewing across, it's fine too. Okay, so the short ends are sewn, and now we're going to align the opposite short ends to the other end of the bottom gusset. Fabrics right sides together. We're making a loop here just like we did for the exterior. Go ahead and clip those or pin them in place. And then we're going to sew again with a half-inch seam allowance along those short ends. Okay, so the interior gusset is complete. We've got it sewn in a loop here. You can see that. And there's that opening where we're going to attach it later on to the zipper. So that's how that looks. I will go ahead and press these seam allowances toward the bottom gusset on each end here. Okay, so the exterior and the lining gussets are complete and we can set those aside for the moment. Okay, so I've got the back exterior piece, that's the plain one without a pocket on it. And I've got my strap holder, I've got my shoulder connector with the strap attached, and I am going to sew these in place so we can, in the next step, sew on the exterior gusset. But first we are going to place the shoulder connector with the strap hardware is going to be facing up toward you. You'll be able to see this just like this. And this will be centered along this top short edge of the exterior. Okay, so a little extra tip here. I've got a piece of 1-inch wide webbing. It's about 9 inches long. I'm going to base this as a loop right on top here. And that is going to act as a little holder. If you hang your bags when you're not using them, you can hang this little loop over a doorknob. So if you wanted, you could also make a fabric strap just like we did with the main strap here. But I think the 1-inch looks nice, so I'm going to go ahead and base that right across the top. Okay, and the last step before we connect the gusset is we're going to place the strap holder. We're going to baste it in place kind of right here on this corner, right before it starts to curve. If you were making this for someone you didn't know if they were right or left-handed, or you wanted them to be able to switch the bag from either side, you could make another additional strap holder with the D-ring and place it on the opposite side. So I'm right-handed. I like to wear it over my left shoulder, so I place it here. If you want to place it over here, you can. If you want to do two, so you can switch it around, you can do that too. So we're going to go ahead and base that right across the edge here. Okay, so the strap holder is basted in place on the bottom there, and then we're going to mark the quarter markings of each exterior piece. We're going to mark the back, the front, and then the loop. So we'll start by doing this back piece, and you could do this a couple ways. You could measure the halfway with a ruler, or you could fold it in half, pinch it, and then mark it. But I'm just going to go ahead and measure it with my ruler. And then we're going to mark the gusset into quarters as well. So the first step to doing that is you're going to align these seams. And then flatten it out. And then I just make a mark on the fold on each side. And then just making sure those are aligned. Do the same for this end. And then we're going to open it up. So we've got the top and bottom markings, and we're going to open it up. We're going to align those markings that we made. Fold it flat again, and then make your markings on each end on the fold again. Okay, so I've got the top, side, bottom, and the remaining side. So those 4 are marked. Okay, so I'm going to get started on attaching the gusset to the front exterior. And we're going to have our front main panel facing up, and this gusset loop, we're going to make sure that is wrong side out essentially. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to match those markings. And I like to use actual pins in this part instead of clips. I feel like it could get more accurate than a clip, but I'll just go ahead and match those. And you can mark on the right side of your fabric or the wrong side. To me, it doesn't really matter. I think I do it both ways a lot of the times, but just so you get those markings, if you can see that, get those markings aligned and put the pin right in there. But important to note here is that the zipper is on the top here, and I've got the loop of the gusset with the zipper on top here. So if you kind of preemptively kind of look at how it's going to be, you're going to make sure that the zipper is on this top edge. You don't want to have it along this bottom here. So we'll go ahead and we'll finish pinning along each of the quarter markings. Okay, so I've got each of the quarters pinned, and then I like to do 2 more on each of these long sides and then leave these short ends with just the center pin. Okay, so that's how it'll look when it's all pinned. If you are a fan of pinning, then go ahead and add more pins. I wait and I clip the corners in this next part when I'm sewing, while I'm sewing. So you could do it beforehand. You could go ahead and clip into this seam allowance by about 3/8 of an inch a few times across this bottom corner, on each of the corners actually, and then get it all pinned, or you can wait and do it while you sew. And I do it that way. I don't know, I think it's just easiest for me. That way I can make slight adjustments as I go if necessary. So we're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I like to start at one long straight stretch, and then we'll continue sewing. When we get to the curve, I'm going to clip with my scissors into that seam allowance, keep sewing, clip, sew, clip, and then we'll have that all attached. All right, so make sure you have your scissors handy and nearby. I just clip into this seam allowance. Usually 3 or 4 times, and that allows that fabric edge to open up to meet that outer curve. And just go slow. If you are getting to a curve and it looks like it's going to bunch or pleat a lot on you, there are a few ways you can compensate for that while you're sewing. If it looks like it's going to have bunches, then you can scoot this out a little ways, the gusset material, so that it's going to be out of the way a little bit past the main exterior fabric. And this is only, gosh, maybe 1/8 of an inch difference. But sometimes just a small adjustment like that while you're sewing is enough to not worry about getting any kind of tucks or pleats. If it seems really tight when you're sewing, like you're not going to make that curve, you can do the opposite and bring that curve, that edge of your top gusset in a little bit from the main exterior. Either way, you're not going to notice it much. Okay, so this is the point after I've got it all sewn around the perimeter here. I'd like to do just a quick check to make sure all my corners are going to look okay when I turn it right side out. And you might be surprised at how it may look weird on the inside, but once you turn it, it looks really nice and smooth. So I'm really happy with that. If I did have some kind of tuck or pleat that happened, I would just go ahead and I would go in here, rip out those stitches maybe a few inches on either side, and then I would re-sew it and just try and get it to go into place. I would probably try and pull this fabric out a little bit and then just re-sew it. And a lot of the times, just by doing that, you'll get it back into place and without any pleats. So this one looks a little goofy, but again, sometimes even just with the good pressing, I am able to get out any kind of weird looking kind of wrinkles. And now I'm going to do the same for the back side of the sling, and I just like to get that all kind of looped toward the center and hold that in place. We're going to make sure to open this zipper, so that's the way we'll be able to turn it right side out when we're done. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to attach the gusset to those same, matching those same quarter markings, each side and the top and bottom. And again, just making sure your zipper is on the top, so it's going to be where the shoulder connector is. So that is that. So I'm going to go ahead and pin those in place. Okay, so there's the gusset pinned in place to the back main panel. And just make sure that all your parts, like the hang loop, if you added one, your shoulder connector, and especially that strap holder with the D-ring, just make sure that's all tucked in nicely and toward the inside of the bag. And when you're sewing, you'll just want to kind of peek in there and make sure that everything is inside so you're not going to accidentally hit it when you're sewing. But we're going to go ahead and sew all along the perimeter, attaching that back panel to the gusset. Make sure you go slow over that strap connector down there at the bottom. Okay, so I've got the gusset attached to the back of the main panel here, but just make sure everything is sewn in. You haven't accidentally sewn the strap in anywhere, and that's kind of what the extra little hang loop will look like. But that looks good to me. So the exterior is done. Okay, so I've got the exterior and I'm gonna just do an overall press right now. And I like to use my pressing ham for these corners. You could also use like a kitchen hot pad, and that way you can keep your hand inside and press from the outside without burning yourself. So I just get the shape over that pressing ham and then I'm gonna press it. My iron is not very hot, so I just use my hands sometimes. Okay, so the exterior is complete. It's gonna look pretty close to being done right now, but we're gonna make the lining next, and then the last step for next week will be combining them all together. So set that all aside, grab your gusset lining gusset that we made earlier, and the 2 lining pieces. And again, we're going to mark the quarter markings just like we did for the exterior pieces. Okay, so now that we've got all of the pieces marked into their quarter markings, we're going to, again, repeat the same process as we did for the exterior. We're going to attach the gusset to each main panel one at a time. And I forgot to mention this on the exterior, but if you have a fabric that feels like it's stretchy, like you're gonna be pulling on it and it's gonna wiggle on you, you could do a line of stay stitching along this whole edge of this gusset piece on each side. And what stay stitching is it's going to be within the seam allowance. So I would do maybe a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, but you're gonna baste all the way around each side of the gusset. And that's gonna prevent that edge from pulling and creating problems when you're gonna attach it to the main panel pieces. So if it stretches a lot, it will make it harder to get everything lined up. So if you do that stay stitching, that might help a lot if you are worried about getting this to fit correctly. So it's just a little preventative measure that you can take. It only takes a few minutes, but sometimes you find it really worth it to avoid any headaches later on. So I'm going to go ahead and pin the lining gusset to the main lining piece, just like we did before, matching those markings. Okay, so the lining is pinned to the lining gusset, and we're going to take it over the sewing machine and sew all along the perimeter, just like before. I tend to worry a whole lot less about how these curves look on the lining piece, but as long as I get these around these corners, I think it's not worth the hassle of trying to fix that on the lining. Okay, so we've got half of the gusset attached to the one main panel, and we're going to grab the other main panel and attach the gusset to that. And just make sure that the opening of your pocket is at this top edge where you have the opening of the gusset. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to pin at each of the quarter markings. Okay, so that's pinned, and we're going to go ahead and sew along the perimeter, and then that's it for the lining. Okay, so that's it for the lining. The gusset is attached to both of the main panel pieces, and that's all together, and we're going to leave that wrong side out. And again, we've got our exterior right side out, and it's all set to go. So that's what we have for now. Okay, so that's it for week 3. We've got the exterior done, the lining done, and next week is when it comes all together. So I'll see you then. Hope you have a great week.